Mudrunner is a great franchise of off-road driving games and a bit of an oddity. They made getting stuck and very slowly struggling through mud, dirt, and snow into a fun challenge. A lot has happened in that franchise over the course of SnowRunner, mod support, and more. And they're going forward. The franchise's first spin-off title has hit consoles, PC, and of course included in that is the Nintendo Switch. So let's dive into all of the changes, improvements, and more. Here is my review of Expeditions, a Mudrunner game for the Nintendo Switch. When it comes to gameplay, this is a 3D driving game with upgrade and off-road elements thrown in. As you go through each mission, you will drive trucks through rocky, muddy, and watery terrain, aiming to fulfill objectives and fight through rough terrain to get there. The first thing to note is that not all of this game's planned features are here yet. While some features have already been re-added, like the horn function I was particularly sad about not having at launch, the co-op multiplayer for this game is not planned to release until about the 3-month point in summer 2024. It's also worth noting that we only have a few different types of environments, and the current roster of vehicles is more in tune with the old Spin Tires game, mostly consisting of the Mudrunner Russian-inspired trucks like the Con and TUZ vehicles. While both American Wilds and SnowRunner included some Western-developed vehicles like the Hummer and Jeep, it seems the only way to access vehicles like that right now are through mods. Speaking of, the Switch version of Expedition launched with mod support, giving you access to new vehicles you can grab in the shop, or the completely game-breaking mod giving you free money in the form of box trucks, easily taking you from $0 to millions in mere seconds. While it's true that SnowRunner on the Switch also eventually got updated for mod support, it's fantastic to have it here at launch. And for those wondering, the touchscreen zoom feature from the Switch version of SnowRunner does return here in Expeditions. You can tap anywhere on the screen to pull up a little magnifying glass and zoom in. As far as the game itself, it's sort of like the first Runner games, but also different. You have your garage where you can buy and upgrade your scouts and trucks and put in little attachments for extra cargo and supplies. But in gameplay, this is more mission oriented. You have 3 regions to choose from, with Colorado as the tutorial, as well as Arizona and the Carpathian Mountains in Europe as the main regions of the game. You do eventually gain access to free roam in these maps like you could in the previous entries, but you have to clear a bunch of missions to get there. The missions themselves are more bite-sized adventures where you're accomplishing one goal. If you went into SnowRunner or Mudrunner, you're all about exploring, loading up materials, and delivering them and doing all of this stuff. But this is more about scouting areas and discovering locations. Many of the missions are simply get here, survey the area, and you're done. They're built around all of the new features that are in this game, like using drones to survey in the air, metal detectors to locate hidden treasure, or weather monitoring stations that can be built at key locations. And that brings us to the mission prep screen. Before every mission, you're required to have certain things, like a metal detector, or hiring a specialist whose field is related to the mission. You can purchase all of these things when you make your so-called loadout for the mission, as well as more optional items like jack screws, anchors, and cameras. More on those later. Once you're in the mission, you essentially follow waypoints. You explore areas by reaching those checkpoints and interacting with the environment. There are many tools in this game for the expeditions that you'll be using a lot, especially the new drone feature letting you manually fly a drone in the area to survey or scanning various landmarks you come across to assess the environment for the mission. Now you're still on the free roam maps during these missions, you just aren't meant to explore the whole thing while you're there. You will still come across optional recovery tasks and hidden upgrades and resources. Doing those will increase the money you get for completing the mission, but it's not the point. Plus, with fuel reserves limited to what you bring with you and find at camp, you can't just endlessly explore without doing what the mission needs. There aren't any fuel stops in this game like there are in SnowRunner. As for the actual driving, this is really just nothing but improvements from SnowRunner. You still have your normal gear shifting with high and low gear, 4-wheel drive, and diff lock, and you got all the old recovery tools like the winch for grabbing onto trees and pulling you out of a stuck position. But we have new tools, some of which are really useful. There's a tire pressure system now, allowing you to lower the pressure to make rocks easier to climb over at the expense of higher fuel consumption. There's also a quick menu for repairing vehicles with available resources, making it very easy to fix up your truck if you hit something too hard, or if you're like me and decide the best way to get to the next waypoint is go in a straight line right off a cliff. But more importantly, there are some optional items you can take with you that are so convenient and useful, a lot of die-hard fans of the Runner series think they make the game too easy. These items are for the franchise's biggest hurdle, when you flip over and there aren't any winch points nearby to help you recover. That's where the jack screw, echo, and anchor come in. The jack screw is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a recovery jack that people use in real off-road adventures when their vehicle unfortunately takes a tumble. In Expedition, it allows you to reset your vehicle in the immediate area, upright and ready to go. The echo and anchor are a little bit different. You can use the echo to gauge how deep water is before you go in to know if you're going to drown and take damage, and the anchor allows you to place a winch point anywhere you want. So if you're not around any trees to winch onto and about to go into a sketchy set of rocks, you set your anchor point, and if you get stuck, you use that anchor point to winch yourself out. Now, as all of these things come together, I think it's a great system, specifically for handhelds like the Switch and Steam Deck. Shorter missions are more tuned to pick up and play sessions, even though you can technically save your progress by just returning to the main menu and hitting continue the next time you play. But I'll admit it feels very different, which I think is both good and odd at the same time. I do like the bite-sized missions, and exploring with a scout was my favorite thing to do in SnowRunner. Just jumping into a Hummer and finding all the hidden things on a map. Though at the same time, I wish free roam were available in Expeditions from the get-go instead of having to do a bunch of missions to be able to unlock it. Either way, you do have a lot to do. Across all 3 regions, you have almost 80 missions to do, plus over 100 activities of optional things that you can find. Sure, it's not as much as the ridiculous and overwhelming amount of content we now have in SnowRunner, but there's a lot to do. Now, presentation. The Runner games keep pushing forward in graphical quality, and thus the Switch ports need to keep bringing it down a notch to keep them running well. Expeditions looks decent, though you will notice a lot of textures being a bit washy and blurry, especially trees. To make a comparison, here is Expeditions moving through an area with some trees and you can see the washy and sometimes jaggy renders for the environments. And here is the Switch version of SnowRunner in a somewhat similar looking environment, and it looks much more detailed. Now don't get me wrong, I think the game looks fine. It just isn't as good as its predecessor. And with performance, things are mostly good. When playing docked, the game sticks to a solid 30 FPS during gameplay, driving, climbing, or tumbling, and it will remain smooth. But in handheld mode, there's a bit of a slowdown effect when moving the camera and driving through various areas. And I may be wrong about this, so feel free to correct me if I am, but I feel like this slowdown in handheld mode did not show up until after the 1.3 patch that added horns back into the game. Though considering I'd played the game for less than a single hour in handheld mode before that patch went live, I might just be remembering it wrong. The real issue with performance, or rather annoyance, is menu lag. When you're going through the garage and setup menus, there's a bit of delay as the selection moves when upgrading and such. It's not a huge issue, but it is rather annoying. That brings us to battery life. Expeditions gives the original and light models a range of about 2 to 3 hours, while the V2 and OLED models get a range of about 5.5 to 6 hours. In conclusion, Expeditions brings yet another Mudrunner to the Switch for handheld off-road driving. Now with the downside, the visuals had to be toned back to maintain performance, and its more bite-sized gameplay will be very different than what Runner fans are used to, at least until they unlock the free roam. But if you love the series or enjoyed the scout vehicles more than hauling loads, it's a good little spin-off that'll add to the nice lineup of quality off-road games for Nintendo's handhelds. And just as a note, I would recommend this game for serious fans and point more towards the previous games if you're new to the franchise. Reviews to Go rates Expeditions, a Mudrunner game for the Nintendo Switch, a 7.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.